Hello and welcome to In Search of the Crystal Skull, an epic adventure into the world of mediocrity. My name is Aaron.
My name is Patricia.
And today we're going to be looking at a holiday classic, and this is Macaulay Culkin's Home Alone. So, the plot of this movie is that the McCallister family is preparing to spend Christmas in Paris, gathering at Peter and Kate's home in Chicago suburb on the night before their departure. Peter and Kate's youngest son, Kevin, is the subject of ridicule by his older siblings and cousins. Kevin inadvertently ruins the family dinner after a brief scuffle against his oldest brother, Buzz, resulting in Kate sending him up to the attic. Kevin berates his mother for allowing the rest of the family to pick on him and wishes that his family would disappear. During the night, heavy winds create a power outage, disabling the alarm clocks and causing the family to oversleep. In the confusion and rush to get to the airport, Kevin is accidentally left behind. Kevin wakes up to find the house empty. Thinking that his wish has come true, he's overjoyed with his newfound freedom, but later Kevin becomes frightened by his next-door neighbor, the old man Marley, who is rumored by the local children to be a serial killer who murdered his own family. The McCallister home is soon stalked by the wet bandits, Harry and Marv, a pair of burglars who have been breaking into other vacant houses in the neighborhood. So, really good setup, I have to say, for this movie, and also really good for, Kevin in this as well, to, give, the audience sympathy over, the fact that he's picked on by his younger siblings, and it is the typical, be careful what you wish for, because you just might get it. So yeah, but
it's kind of funny that this was the movie that is considered to be at 67% on Rotten Tomatoes because it was the highest grossing Christmas film of all time until, believe it or not, 2018's Illumination's The Grinch came out. And it was the highest grossing live action comedy film until The Hangover Part II about 20 years later. So kind of crazy to think that, a staple in Christmas classic just so happens to be in Crystal Skull territory.
Yeah, mind you, I mean, I'm a bit edgy about, talking about this movie because let's be honest about this. This is a beloved Christmas classic by a lot, and I mean a lot of people. This is one movie that definitely does get watched at Christmas without a doubt, and not much of an excuse now because now you can watch it for on a subscription on Disney Plus. You can watch it on YouTube for like $3, and also you can watch it on Apple TV too. So, it's got plenty of love in plenty of places. And also, and if you've not got any subscription services to that as well, and if you want really the authentic cinematic experience, here in the UK, they still play it in theaters to this day.
Wow.
And this is a movie that came out in 1990.
Now, if you remember that we actually briefly discussed about Home Alone because around the same time that Home Alone was in theaters, The Rescuers Down Under was in theaters, and that severely underperformed because Home Alone was out in theaters. So, yeah, going back into full circle, finally talking about this. And it's kind of funny because several years ago, I actually discussed about all of the Home Alone films at the time. I discussed about Home Alones 1 through 5, alongside with Tom, several other of my friends from Manic Expression. And looking into it, the first 2 Home Alone movies are considered to be the Christmas classics, while everything else that came out afterwards were considered to be like the ones that were trying to cash in on the popularity of the Home Alone movies. And, I know some people really like Home Alone 3, but let's be honest. I mean, Alex D. Links, even though that he did an admirable job, he's no Macaulay Culkin. And 4 and 5, well, those are just awful, and you should not even bother watching them. I haven't seen the remake of the Home Alone that they did on Disney Plus not too long ago, so I can't really say on my opinions of that one.
Yeah, well, I mean, if it's in Crystal Skull territory, I'm sure we'll get to it at some point. But I mean, right now we're sticking with the 90s, Christmas movies. So we all know and love. But I mean, in regards to this movie, I mean, I guess an interesting talking point is in itself The Rescuers Down Under. Why is it that Home Alone performed, brilliantly, but The Rescuers Down Under didn't? And, I mean, I guess maybe there's a few factors involved. I mean, you just have to watch the Home Alone trailer. By the way, the Home Alone trailer back in the 90s was all over television. You couldn't watch a TV station without seeing the Home Alone trailer at least once, at least within the first 10 minutes. This movie was promoted to all hell. Like, like
Yeah.
it was, and also on top of that as well, like, even on the VHS tapes, they even like put the Home Alone trailers in there too. So like, if you were going to be, well, if you rented a movie or if you bought something from 20th Century Fox, likelihood is during that time in the 90s, likelihood is you're going to see a Home Alone trailer, regardless of whatever movie you watched. So it
Yeah,
was,
exactly.
yeah.
And just like we said in the Rescuers Down Under discussion in Crystal Skull, that the popularity of the Crocodile Dundee movies were pretty much over by the time that Rescuers Down Under came into theaters. And as you mentioned before about the importance of advertisement, that people knew about it through the commercials, through the posters, through the advertisements with magazines and with newspapers. So everybody knew about Home Alone. And when they saw it in the theaters and it became an instant Christmas classic, there were a ton of video games, there was a ton of merchandise. I mean, go watch the Angry Video Game Nerd episode on Home Alone games. So, yeah, there's been a ton of notoriety when it comes to Home Alone, while something like Rescuers Down Under was not even remotely as huge compared to Home Alone.
I guess another thing as well is that, like, I mean, the Rescuers Down Under, I think, was also, I mean, it wasn't really like the start of the Renaissance era, I guess you could say. Like, I think Disney, I think at the time was still, I mean, The Little Mermaid had come out like a year before. I mean, obviously, and there was, obviously that started to like to turn eyeballs again, I think, towards Disney. But I think the Rescuers Down Under, I don't think they were there yet. I don't think Disney. I think to kind of like repair their reputation. I think compared to like all the other duds that they had come before it. I guess, and so I guess
Exactly.
and when you looked, and also when if you look just alone at the Home Alone trailer, and you looked at like what 20th Century Fox were providing at the time, like it was a no sell that you went to go see a 20th Century Fox movie, family movie, because you were going to get entertained, and you just look at the Home Alone trailer. I'm actually just watching it right now, like it's so amazing how it's all like put together and how it's promoted and everything like that, and they hit the right notes to get people into the theaters. So, like, I mean, Home Alone, 20th Century Fox's promotional team, were just one step ahead of the game, I think, at that point. So,
Exactly. And it also helps that Home Alone came out around November 10th. So it was like a few weeks before Thanksgiving. And usually a movie theater would have a film about a month or so, depending on if it's like really, really popular. Maybe they'll have it for a month and a half or 2 months. Or if you're like The Rescuers Down Under or Cats Don't Dance, if a movie does not do very, very well, then they'll pull it out of the theaters like maybe a week or so after it's been released. So yeah, Home Alone did stay around the theaters for I think a little bit longer because of the Christmas season. And then eventually when people started watching it and then word of mouth spread about Macaulay Culkin and Joe Pesci and Daniel Stern and various others that were able to make the movie like really, really stand out, then it started to become the Christmas classic as we know of it. And I think that Home Alone was able to showcase that, hey, I think that a movie starring a troublesome kid was who's trying to get attention from his family, and then all of a sudden he's stuck alone, and then he just goes into a lot of crazy situations that any normal kid would have if he was home alone. I mean, this is the 90s, so in the movie we have the situation where the power has gone completely out, the phone service is not working, his family is far away in Paris, France, so he literally has nobody to be around with. So the fact that he's able to finally get all the space and attention that he's always wanted for himself because he's the youngest of the family. Nobody's paying attention to him. Everybody's treating him really badly. For him to get this opportunity to be like just going all balls to the walls crazy and doing whatever he pleases, a lot of kids really tuned into it. In fact, if you remember our discussions during the Roald Dahl retrospective, that every time that we've talked about a character from a Roald Dahl film, such as Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory and James and the Giant Peach, we've always said that these characters are the stereotypical timid yet optimistic characters. And then when Home Alone came out, everybody was into like the rambunctious characters with a heart of gold. And we saw saw that throughout the 90s, there were a lot of movies that tried to cash in on the success of Home Alone. They try to find kid actors to basically emulate Macaulay Culkin. They try to put in like these booby traps because, hey, kids really love that from Home Alone. So they really, really tried to emulate Home Alone because it became so popular.
Yeah,
So
do you remember? Do you remember Mr. Nanny?
yes.
Yeah, the one with Hulk Hogan. Good grief. They took whatever Macaulay Culkin was doing and they like turned it into like deadly scenarios, pretty much. And
Yeah, and I remember the discussion of Three Ninjas when the front cover of the VHS tape said, "We took a little bit of Karate Kid and Home Alone, and you have Three Ninjas." So yeah, Home Alone for a short amount of time just became like this massive phenomenon.
yeah, I mean, also on top of that as well, like the '90s was the era of Sonic the Hedgehog. Pretty much, the blue blur with attitude, and I mean, obviously that wasn't Sega's like original intent, but when they transferred it over to the United States of America, they wanted to give him spunk, they wanted to give him attitude, and that was just like that was the era at the time, and those are the kind of characters that kids wanted to relate to. Pretty much,
Yes.
yeah. It's just it was. I mean, it became a trope later on, but back at the time, like it was fresh and new. It
Yeah.
was, it was very
I mean,
different
we
from
had Bart Simpson was another classic example of the rambunctious kid that everybody wanted to be like, and parents were like, "Oh no, no, no! We have to have our kids be the good kids," just like we said earlier, all those like Roald Dahl adaptations where he's like the good, timid yet optimistic kid. No, we want to be the rambunctious kid. We want to be the one to cause
Patricia,
trouble. We want to be the one to do all that
this
stuff.
is George H.W. Bush. We want you to be more like the Waltons and less like the Simpsons. No, yeah,
Exactly.
exactly. Like, and again, like the Republicans should stop picking on the Simpsons because it never works out for them. But anyway, regardless of that, yeah. So like that was the era at the time, and Macaulay Culkin was the face of this. At one point,
Yes.
and like Home Alone definitely transported him to that point, and even went on to like have a sequel after that, like Home Alone 2, which I don't know where that stand currently sits in the moment in regards to for Rotten Tomatoes. We'll have to see where it is, but I mean going back to this movie, the one good thing I would say about this is that I mean obviously you got the family like set to one side in Paris, so the main concentration of the the chemistry that we have here is Kevin, Harry, and Marv. Harry and Marv, the wet bandits. And even though like these bandits like want to like rob these houses and also want to try and get hold of this kid and everything, and all the shenanigans happening to that. The one thing I'll say is that there is good chemistry between Macaulay, Joe, and Daniel in all of this. Pretty much.
It
And
is,
so,
yeah. There's this really nice chemistry that is between these three actors. And I think that it was able to work out because, Joe Pesci is known for being like the really, dark and sinister character. He's been in a lot of mafia films. I mean, we knew about him in his portrayal in Goodfellas. So, he was able to fit perfectly as the thief. And then Daniel Stern. I guess at that point, I mean, if you're not familiar with like City Slickers or him being the narrator of the Wonder Years as the older Kevin, then, seeing him as this big goofball was kind of an interesting change of pace for Daniel Stern's character. And then you have, obviously with Macaulay Culkin's Kevin McCallister, was the rambunctious one. So, seeing all of this collide together was actually like really well done, and they all have their own unique personalities that still make them memorable.
Mm-hmm. So, I mean, in regards to the one thing I really do like is that this thing does not forget that it's a Christmas movie, and you can see through all the lights, like the family and everything like that. Like it's it never forgets where it is, which I think is a really good thing. I think in regards to Home Alone, but I mean, the one thing I will say, it does kind of go to a detriment though, because like it will always be now known as a Christmas movie pretty much at this point. So like it is like one of the movies. I mean, obviously, it's good that there's like once a year, like it will find its place, but unfortunately, it is that once a year that you'll mostly find it. Unfortunately, so,
but I think that another thing that's really good about this movie was Kevin breaking away from his fears. Like, we saw two times in which he was able to face them. The one fear that he had was with the furnace downstairs in the basement where he was like doing his laundry. And then the second fear was with Old Man Marley, which is this next door neighbor that his older brother told his cousin and Kevin a story about how he murdered his family and half the people down the block with a snow shovel. And he turned the salt in the trash can that he was using to melt the snow. He mummified their bodies with it. So he's had this fear of Old Man Marley throughout the course of the movie whenever he met up with him and running away from him. So there's instances in which that Kevin is able to break away from those fears and actually confront them, saying, this isn't so bad. Once you get to know the person, or once you confront the thing, then you're able to break away from it, which is actually a really important lesson, because I'm sure that we've all had that one neighbor down the street who looked creepy, and once we got to know them, they were actually really, really nice. So I think that that's also a really nice gesture to the story.
Yeah. But anyway, let's talk about everyone's favorite part of the movie, shall we? And
yes, let's talk about the booby traps.
Yeah, so there are so many booby traps in this, and it's quite funny, really, when you see how much kind of I guess it is comical violence, but the amount of pain and the amount of suffering you see, the wet bandits go through. I'm really surprised they managed to keep its PG rating when you really think about it.
I think there's a YouTuber out there who actually analyzed each of the booby traps and talked about what repercussions they will suffer from if they actually got hurt in real life.
Yeah. So, would you believe it? Actually, someone did the best Home Alone traps ranked in this. So, I mean, they're not all strictly Home Alone. I mean, obviously, it's doing the other ones, but one of the ones I come to note is the burning doorknob. So, he heats up the doorknob, and then poor Joe Pesci goes to grab it and ends up permanently burning his M in his hand.
Yes.
So, yeah, there's that.
Yeah, and another one that really sticks out to me that a lot of people remember is the blowtorch to the head, where Harry's head completely gets burned off, and he has to run over and use snow so that he can be able to take out the fire.
Good grief! When they actually did that, I thought, good grief! I thought they would put in a stunt actor or something like that, but no, that's him. It's just,
yes.
I don't know what, I mean, obviously they must have, put something in the hat to, stop him from being burned and stuff, but, after hearing the stories of, do you remember when we covered Fawlty Towers back in Casual Chats? And we talked about Manuel from Fawlty Towers when he was they recovered him from the fire, and he had all those chemicals that were in his suit to make him look like he was burning and stuff like that, and that permanently scarred him because it all burned through his suit and everything.
I remember,
yeah, exactly. When I see stuff like that now, it does make me feel very uncomfortable actually seeing it. So.
Yeah, especially since, he could have been severely damaged with his own body trying to perform as a character in a TV show.
Mm-hmm. And by the way, this won't be the first time he actually does that stunt. He actually did it the second time actually in Home Alone 2 when his head got set on fire. So.
Yes, but that was a different situation where the blowtorch lands on, he turns it on, the blowtorch lights his head on fire, and then he actually tried to take it off, instead with water, with gas. So, yes, that's even much more of a dangerous situation of being exploded than the first movie.
Yeah. So, anyway, to give you a whole rundown of, what happens to both Harry and Marv. So, Harry gets shot with a BB gun. He slips and falls on the ice-covered steps approaching the front door. His right hand is severely burned, as we said before. His head gets burned with a blowtorch. Walks into a plastic wrap covered in chocolate glue and also gets blasted with feathers, blowing from a fan to make him look like a chicken. Slips on Kevin's micro machines on the front of the stairs, also with Marv. Gets hit in the face, losing his cherished gold tooth with a paint can and going up the stairs, and is knocked, also crushes Marv at the same time as well. Falls down after tripping on a wire, knocked unconscious. Accidentally gets hit in the stomach with a crowbar by Marv, who's trying to kill Buzz's pet tarantula Axel, and falls after swinging into a wall while attempting to use a rope to cross to Kevin's treehouse, due to Kevin cutting the rope with the hedge clippers and getting hit with a snow shovel by Old Man Marley at the very end of it too. So.
Yeah, I'm surprised that they were able to like stand up and being able to walk around just fine without like having multiple bones broken.
Yeah, like and also as well, like it's just the amount of violence that okay, it's comical violence, but how on earth they managed to still get away with all of this? It's crazy, you
It
know.
is insane. I would say that looking in the booby traps of the first movie, yes, it is very, very painful. I would say that this and Home Alone 2 rivals in terms of the booby traps, where it is very painful and very hilarious if you know about the proper context.
Hmm. Yeah. So,
Now, I'm actually curious. I mean, which of the movies has your favorite set of booby traps, the first or the second?
I mean, the original one sticks out in my mind at the moment, but mind you, I'll probably watch the second one at some point and then maybe then completely change my mind. So, like, I mean, like, either way, like, all these traps in these Home Alone movies are pretty devastating.
Yeah, absolutely. It's crazy to think about how they were able to get away with it in a PG rating. Another really crucial thing that I want to mention about Home Alone is Kevin's mother, Catherine, where she will stop at absolutely nothing to get back home to her son for the holidays. Once she finds out that Kevin is not in the airplane going to Paris, the moment that they land, she's trying to find her way immediately to get back home. But the problem is that all of the tickets have been booked, so she has to find other ways so that she can be able to get to Chicago in time for the holiday so that he doesn't stay home alone. And I think that I have to give credit for her determination because any mother would be like really concerned about her son being home alone and having to deal with not knowing how to take care of himself. I mean, he's 8 years old and this is the 90s. So, yeah, I think that, her determination so that she can be able to get back home was really, really well done. And one of my favorite scenes that happens in the movie was when she was able to meet up with the poker players as they're heading over to Milwaukee. And they even said that they'll give her a ride to Chicago, who's played by the wonderful John Candy. Especially that one scene that really just irks me so much in terms of how heartbreaking it is that even though that they're traveling all the time for their polka performances, and they're not even a well-known, popular polka band. They're just like some schlubby guys who just travel around to a certain amount of states and they just play polka and then that's pretty much it. But they sacrifice so much so that they can be able to do what they do. I mean, they even mentioned about like, one person that he barely knows his kid's name, another person he's never even met his kids. It's like, wow, imagine being away from your families for so long at the expense of being a part of a polka group that doesn't even get a lot of popularity or notoriety. It's like, as we mentioned in the Weird Al podcast a while back, polka just doesn't seem to have like mainstream attention compared to like, hip hop or R&B or rock or anything like that. I just find that to be pretty sad. Although
You know
the
what? I was actually going to say, like, where maybe they're, where they're keeping the dream alive of, like, wanting to be backup group for Weird Al Yankovic one day.
Probably. I mean, at this point in time, he would have. I think this was like before he even made his comeback with "Smells Like Nirvana." So maybe, who knows? I think that another really morbid thing going into that scene again that the guy mentioned was that the time in which that he left his son over at a funeral parlor and he spent like hours just looking at the corpse and he didn't like talk to his parents for like 7 weeks. And Catherine was like really determined about like, how is my son going to react to me after arguing with him about like, being this spoiled brat who's like aiming for attention. And then all of a sudden, oops, we left him home alone. So she was really worried about how he would react to her the moment that she got home. So again, she's being a very caring mother.
I don't think there's anything else really to kind of discuss with Home Alone. I mean, like it's a Christmas classic. I mean, it's played on TV all the time, always available on streaming, and even like I was saying at the very beginning of the podcast, still in theaters today. So, I guess we are now at the point where. By the way, one thing I think I should point out is that the music in this movie, like it's, I mean, when you hear the music of Home Alone, you definitely recognize it. It's got such a recognizable tune when you listen to it.
All right, so if there's nothing else that we can say about it, let's rank it.
Okay, so I mean, It's Christmas classic. It's it's got great music, great story. It's got great action moments, I guess you could say, in it as well. Great comedy, timing, everything like that. And it shows like this the hilarity of like a boy basically being home alone and being able to do whatever he wants. At the very beginning of the movie, and then overcoming his fears and coming up strong at the end of it. So I'd say it's a solid. Well, I'd say it's an 8.5 at least.
In my opinion, I think it's a 9.
Okay. Okay. So I
Yeah,
guess.
because I mean everything about this movie is excellent. I really love the presentation. The music that is performed by John Williams is fantastic. It's right up there with Star Wars and Indiana Jones and Superman in terms of like the music that is being played. And also the direction from Chris Columbus is also pretty well done. John Hughes, as we mentioned in the last podcast on Miracle on 34th Street, he does a really good job of the writing. A lot of people may know John Hughes for two things: his coming of age movies in the 80s and his comedy movies in the 90s. So the transition between like films such as Pretty in Pink, 16 Candles, and Breakfast Club, and going into a new direction with Home Alone, I think it was pretty well done. That shows the diversity with his writing style. Unfortunately, if you've seen a lot of John Hughes movies that came out during the mid 90s, where he was trying to ride on the success of his Home Alone stuff, it was pretty hit and miss. I mean, he did do Home Alone 2, which a lot of people have issues with, being a facsimile of the original. He did the screenplay and he produced the Miracle on 34th Street remake, which a lot of people said it was more depressing than the original. And he also did some other movies that were just not really as good. I mean, he did Home Alone 3, he did Baby's Day Out, he did various other movies. So his stuff was pretty hit and miss, but I would say that this is definitely one of his big hits.
Yeah. And in regards to Macaulay Culkin himself, like, unfortunately, like, Home Alone ended up kind of like being his movie pretty much, I guess, because, the next thing he did was Home Alone 2, Not in New York. I mean, like, he did other stuff. I mean, like, he was in the Michael Jackson Black or White, music video. That was kind of
Yeah.
like a weird cameo. And, I mean, obviously he was in The Pagemaster, that failed, and then he tried to be much Richie Rich, and that wasn't all that much successful either, and unfortunately, like, he was in, in and out of, like, Robot Chicken and things like that, but besides that, I mean, like, just, there's nothing else really of note to say that, he did really anything else.
Yeah,
So.
you remember when he tried to go into a serious direction with The Good Son? Oh
Oh,
my
good
God.
grief! Like it's just no. I don't like it. Oh, who was the other? Who was the other kid in that? Like, wasn't he? That was Elijah Wood.
Wood.
Would you believe it? Good
It was
grief!
Elijah Wood who was alongside with Macaulay Culkin and The Good Son. Imagine that. Kevin McCallister and Frodo.
Frodo. Good grief! Well,
Amazing.
I'm really glad that the Lord of the Rings went with Elijah Wood and not Macaulay Culkin for Frodo. That's all I can say.
Oh, Jesus. No.
Yeah.
Anyway, yeah, I feel really bad for Macaulay because, I mean, he even though that he did other films, I mean, he did Uncle Buck and he did, various other things, but Home Alone seemed to have been like his major 1-2 punch in terms of his popularity. It's like you said before, he did other movies, but they just weren't Home Alone. And he pretty much suffered around the 2000s when he was trying to, find his place in the acting world, especially since, he was already a teenager, he hit puberty. And so he was doing a lot of these other roles. And then, he just kind of like fell apart. And after a while, he picked himself up. He became, the leader of a rock band. And then he has his own website where he does online content. So, yeah, I think that, Macaulay Culkin now is in a much better place than he was before, but it just took him 10 years for him to recuperate from all the stuff that he had to do.
Yeah, it's like he went down a pretty dark path at one point. Didn't he did like some kind of random cameo in like the Blues Brothers 2000 movie as well?
Yes, he did. Yeah.
Oh, good grief, that was a stinker.
Yeah.
Makes you wonder about those Roald Dahl kids. I think maybe they knew when to quit.
Yeah, maybe he should have been James from James and the Giant Peach.
Well, that's a discussion in another series that we do. So, but
yeah, that's very true. Yeah,
yeah.
It's kind of sad that he went through that, but at the end of the day, he was able to pick himself up, and it seemed for a while that you had the Culkin brothers who were trying to be like the next series of brothers, almost akin to like like other brothers who became really popular on, films and on television.
Oh,
Like,
Wayne's
in
brothers.
addition, yeah, the Wayans brothers. Yeah, exactly. The Wayans brothers. So, in addition to Macaulay, there was Kieran Culkin who was in this movie, and he played as Fuller, the cousin who constantly wet himself, and he became a well-known actor in his own right. Probably not as big as Macaulay. He's been in several other movies such as Cider House Rules and Father of the Bride, and you may know him for his other stuff such as Scott Pilgrim versus the World, Wiener Dog, and No Sudden Move. But yeah, I don't think he's much of a household name compared to Macaulay. And then there's Rory, which he has been in several other movies. He's been in Scream 4, You Can Count on Me, Signs. But again, not much of a big one compared to Macaulay. And then there's Christian Culkin, who's the only movie that I can remember him being on was My Summer Story, that continuation of A Christmas Story, which was not as revered compared to the original. But yeah, it seemed like they were trying to branch out into like this whole series of these brothers making all of these big bucks because we already know how much of a manipulator his father was of stealing all their money. It almost kind of reminds me a little bit of how Joe Jackson was to to his sons when making the Jackson 5 because he never got his start in his own career. But yeah, I think that at the end of the day, they were able to, break away from that and become successes in their own right. Removing the biases aside, I think that, Macaulay Culkin's acting in Home Alone is a fantastic portrayal of a real kid and how the 90s was in terms of showcasing that rebelliousness when we had decades prior where the timid yet optimistic kids were the ones who were the starring roles. So in a way he kind of like changed how we see media. So yeah, Home Alone is a fantastic movie. It's a Christmas classic for a reason. Please go check it out.
Yeah. And that is it for In Search of the Crystal Skull until the next episode. So thanks everybody for listening and take care and bye-bye for now.
See you later.